Good evening. I'm Eric Lee, Director of the Kimbell Art Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the fourth State of the Arts to be held at the Kimbell. Tonight we examine how various Fort Worth groups are creating exposure and opportunities for emerging artists. What promises to be a thought-provoking panel discussion will be moderated by Jerome Weeks, Senior Arts Reporter and Producer for KERA's Art&Seek. Our panelists were also tasked with selecting a few outstanding emerging artists for a pop-up exhibition in the lobby of this building. And I'm delighted to welcome here tonight the chosen artist, Fabiola Venezuela and the Kimbell's own Jesse Sierra Hernandez. I hope you will join us for a reception in the lobby following this discussion to have a glass of wine and to view their exceptional works. This in-depth presentation couldn't have happened without our dedicated partners at KERA's Art&Seek and Texas Christian University's College of Fine Arts. Thank you and welcome to our colleagues from Art&Seek. Their team produces arts journalism on KERA FM and artandseek.org. They also oversee a massive arts calendar that highlights the work of more than 3,000 groups and venues. And that calendar database is now shared on other arts websites, such as the Dallas Arts District, the Greater Denton Arts Council, and the Dallas Office of Cultural Affairs. To produce the State of the Arts conversation series, Art&Seek partners with the Dallas Museum of Art and, of course, with us here at the Kimbell. That combination of arts journalism, a robust calendar, and community partnerships has made Art&Seek a model nationally for public media. I'd also like to welcome our colleagues from TCU. For decades, the museum has enjoyed partnering with TCU on various programs, and we're thrilled that they have joined us in the production of State of the Arts. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Catherine Ware, Special Assistant to the Dean of TCU's College of Fine Arts. Catherine.
Hello, and certainly thank you, Eric. On behalf of the Dean of the College of Fine Arts, Dr. Ann Helmreich, who regrets she could not be here, on her behalf, I do want to express a very sincere appreciation and gratitude for a long-standing collaboration between the college and the Kimbell. We certainly look forward to many years of the same. Regarding visual arts and the College of Fine Arts in particular, the college enjoys an energetic partnership with the Kimbell as well as the other local visual arts museums. Our professors teach classes in many of the galleries, affording students a very intimate perspective on the works that they're studying and learning to communicate about. Our students also regularly intern in a variety of capacities, gaining them a perspective unlike few others on the administration and execution of visual arts programming. Tonight's discussion regarding the arts resonates particularly with us because we at the College of Fine Arts at TCU care deeply about preparing students for the future and supporting emerging artists through their study and beyond. Across all the fields that we represent, of course. This is the visual arts, but it's also music, dance, theater, and design. We do this through courses that reinforce the tradition of each individual discipline. And on the campus of TCU, we also represent a curriculum dedicated to liberal arts. So that's taking a foundation in a certain discipline and broadening a student's perspective across many different fields of study. We're also deeply committed to exploring a new area of interest, and that is entrepreneurship. Helping students gain the skills that are really necessary and vital to a successful career in the 21st century, in the creative industries and beyond. We want to help them shape their careers with a purpose and a strategic advantage. To that end, I'm sure I'll be sharing many of the things that we hear as a shared community tonight. I'll take that back with me to the college and share with my colleagues there. Speaking of my colleagues on campus, I would be remiss to say that throughout the day today, as I walked the halls and passed certain people, they said, "Oh, that's right, you're going to be at the Kimbell tonight with the KERA panel." And one of our proud alums. You'll be hearing from Chris Blay tonight, who's a graduate of the TCU College of Fine Arts. So with that little pat on the back for ourselves, I will happily give the floor over to our facilitator for the evening, Jerome Weeks, senior arts reporter and producer for KERA's Art&Seek. Jerome?
Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for coming, and you know what to do. I regretfully have to announce that Lauren Childs could not be with us from Fort Works Art, and she expressly informed us that I should say she is in the hospital. Nothing life-threatening, but she wanted you to know that she wouldn't be here otherwise. But through the wizardry of radio, she will be here. I wanted to tell a short anecdote to help set the tone and direction of the evening before I introduce the panel. There's a man named Jason Epstein. He's one of the great literary men in America. He helped found the New York Review of Books. He was Norman Mailer's editor, Philip Roth's editor. He was a major figure in publishing. And about 10 years ago, he came out with a book called Book Business. And if you remember, at the time, it was sort of the height of internet triumphalism. You know, books are dying, newspapers are dying, radio's dying, music, all that. And it seemed an odd time to come out with a book that was a memoir about his own book business, but also projecting into the future. And when I say book business, think of it as a metaphor for all offline culture, visual arts, music, whatever. And so I asked him, you know, what did he foresee? And he said, you know, 30, 40 years ago, when my children asked me if should they go into publishing, I said, you can, but I wouldn't. I'd advise against it. He said, I could tell you what schools to go to, what internships you need to take, what departments you need to move up to, and how you can get to become an editor at a publishing house. I thought, I'd like Jason Epstein as a father. But he said, that's it. So those paths have been set for generations. Those are the paths to power, and that's all that'll happen. He said, if my children asked me to go into publishing now, I would say, go for it. And I said, why? Publishing houses were closing, mind you. Newspapers were downsizing. And he said, because everything is on the table. He said, you can have an idea, and you can create something with it. The boomers and the generation before them created these institutions. But your world, I won't be in. You will create it. And everything is up for grabs. So, with that in mind, I'd like to grab our panel. Christopher Blay is an artist, writer, and curator, a graduate of TCU, as you heard. He has worked as a curator for the Art Corridor Gallery at Tarrant County College Southeast for the past 7 years, received the Meadows Museum Moss Chumley Award in 2013, and is the spring 2017 visiting artist at the Dallas Museum of Art's Center for Creative Connections. Chris. Thank you. Thank you. Megan Henderson, is the Director of Events and Communication for Near Southside, Inc., a nonprofit community development organization. She is the producer of Arts Goggle, Open Streets, and Friday on the Green. In 2015, she established Art South. This year, she will introduce Southside by 7. Megan. Thank you. And Dee Lara is a Fort Worth-based artist and curator, a co-founder of the art collective Exhibitionists and Art Tooth, an artist-run hybrid gallery. Dee holds a BA in liberal arts, pursuing a BS in nursing and a BA in art history from Texas Women's University. She's a contributing writer to arts publication, Honest Opinion, and she works at the Modern Art Museum in Fort Worth. Dee. Thank you very much. Nope. That one.
I love the kiddo.
So I wanted to go from simple to complex, as it were, in terms of the organizations that we have represented here. So we'll be starting with Christopher at the end in terms of the arts collectives that he was involved in. Two of them, F8 and the Homecoming Committee. And I hope you could explain what they were and why they were. Why were they created?
Group F8 was something that I organized with 7 other photographers here in Fort Worth in the early 2000s, and it stemmed from this idea that we were all working individually and exhibiting works locally, and we wanted to consolidate our efforts and try to create something that was loosely organized around the idea of just being serious about what we were doing. And so we exhibited in spaces that we negotiated with building owners and a couple of sort of pop-up galleries. And so that was the experience. For 2 or 3 years, we organized our own exhibitions. We tried to make share the connections we had with the local press, and we just continued and did the exhibitions that we wanted to do. And then from that point, it sort of we dispersed, and some of the group continued as F8, and other members went on to continue with photography and art. And it was just a really good hub of ideas and sort of peer review and friendship that sort of blossomed into creative and studio practices that are still thriving today. And with, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
This was totally self-generated. It had no administration. It was just a group, a loose group of friends and artists.
That's right.
You told me that one reason you did this was to break a kind of catch-22 that exists, and that is no gallery representation, no media coverage. No media coverage, no gallery representation. How did a collective, a group help?
I mean, it's the adage that there's strength in numbers, but it's also this idea that the fuel that's consumed when you're working with your peers in a sustained way is something that sort of fosters this determination and rigor that isn't always present as an emerging artist. So I think that sort of fueled the desire and the ability to get the kinds of exposure and the kinds of coverage that we were hoping to get. And so yeah, and some of these artists like Tanya Habjoka is a Fort Worth photographer of Jordanian descent, and she moved back to Jordan and is now sort of an internationally acclaimed photographer. But I remember our early conversations about just doing things here in Fort Worth because this is where we live and this is what we want to do. And Loli Cantor and James Johnston, who is with the Lone Star Film Festival, Nick Prendergast, all these people have gone on to pursue their interests. But I think it wasn't the genesis of their pursuit of art, but it was certainly this sort of like working together and just essentially saying, no one's going to come here and do this for us, so we have to do it for ourselves.
So it was a stepping stone, albeit a temporary one.
Yeah, you can say that.
So tell us about the Homecoming Committee, semi-legendary Homecoming Committee.
Okay, so I have to preface this by saying that I was present at the origin of the Homecoming Committee, and those charming faces up there. And it started with most of the people that you see here. Maybe there are a couple of people that aren't present, but Devin Nolan, Tim Harding, Chris, Bradley, all these people. Essentially, we had a get-together at Tiffany Wolf's house and decided that we were going to do something, and they actually asked me if I wanted to participate. So I was sort of like on the periphery of the planning and organization, but we ended up doing a project in Cam Shep's studio, Cam is a sculpture professor here in Fort Worth, and he was generous enough to let us use his space. And it was just a loose organization of people. And after my initial stint, they went on to do some really even more exciting things at the Dallas Museum, at the Central Track UT Dallas residency, and a couple of galleries here in Fort Worth. So that was, it was something that I was happy to be a part of, and something that had a similar effect for me. It was working with people that were really serious about what they were doing, and using that fuel to put back into individual practices and continue from there.
Once again, a loose group, not officially, no one was taking notes of meetings and...
I don't know. There are a couple of people in here that were members of that organization. I'm not sure if they took notes, but we definitely met and were serious about organizing the things that we were doing, and serious about how it was presented with some very rigorous studio practice that was rewarded by the opportunities that were afforded after the initial sort of warehouse party. And although it was a loose connection, there were people that were really serious about sticking to the rigors of their studio practice and creating something that wasn't only for entertainment or this sort of brief evening event, but something that we all knew that would continue in our individual studio practices.
You've mentioned studio practice frequently. Why is that significant, particularly in terms of a group? How is that emphasized? How is that promulgated?
Well, I think it just creates a space where you can continue to do the thing in your studio that you're already doing, whether you're a painter, sculptor, conceptual artist, installation artist. You have your peers, and it's like a peer-reviewed kind of relationship where we have conversations about what we're doing, and we share our resources, whether it's like physical materials or ideas or connections. And these things are essential when you're in a community that doesn't have maybe the networks and infrastructures that support the kinds of studio practices that we're pursuing. And it's important that in the vacuum of that sort of lack of infrastructure, if you would, that artists do that for themselves. And I think that's where we were coming from, essentially.
I have to say, as tonight's official spokesman for all official media, that when faced with 50,000 arts events on a weekend, it's hard to choose to pick out what's important, what's interesting. But the distinction between a solitary artist and, oh, look, there's a semi-autonomous collective, can make a significant difference, because it must mean something, that these people have actually joined together and are trying to do something collectively.
Yeah, I mean, it means something to the people that are doing it. And that's...
Microgrant had something of a provocative nature to it. How long has Art&Seek been in existence?
We've really only been operating about 9 months now.
And yet you raised $5,000 for a microgrant.
Well, and that's something that we considered when we launched Art&Seek, was that we were artists that work at the Modern. We're not wealthy patrons. We really didn't have a lot of backing. And what we decided to do was use existing spaces in Fort Worth so that we wouldn't have the overhead of maintaining a gallery space. And it would also encourage us to go out into different places in the community, different galleries, different markets, to make something work And through sales or a call for artists, we were able to generate enough revenue towards where at 7 months along, we're like, you know, we have this amount of money, what's the best use we can make of it? And that's where the money came from and why we decided to direct it in that regard.
You recently did a collaboration with a gallery in Dallas, Row 2. Why? There have been similar collaborations before, but it's still a relatively rare event. Why?
Well, actually, we partner pretty much with everyone for our exhibition. So our first exhibition, we partnered with Gallery 76102, which is downtown. So it's UTA's satellite gallery space. We've partnered with Megan for Arts Goggle.
Yeah.
We partnered with 500X for Mind the Gap. And with Row 2, it was one of our first complete partnerships with a commercial space. So like I said, it really allows us to go into a commercial gallery, it allows us to go into a university setting or a public art setting and engage with those different audiences. And it allows us to work with a really diverse group of artists.
I asked you when we spoke about, you call yourself a gallery project, and one of your aims obviously is doing all these collaborations, but was there ever an idea down the line for a permanent space? And you said there was a definite need for one in Fort Worth. Why?
I think there is a need for more spaces, and it's an ongoing dialogue that I think all of us at Art&Seek have had. There's something really beautiful about having somewhere where people who love art and love ideas can congregate, and to be around other people who love those things, to have that shelter. Fort Worth could definitely use more of them. When we think about commercial gallery spaces, I bet most of us in the audience can think about maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know how often they're visited, and many of those galleries run into the same problems that we do as independent artists. You're so busy curating that maybe you don't have time to market, or you're busy administrating and you don't have time to discover new works or put them into the appropriate context. I think Fort Worth would benefit to have more of those spaces because there is such a wealth of artists and ideas.
Is it a question of diversity also?
It's definitely a question of diversity. You know, one of the things that we explored specifically in Mind the Gap was the idea of cultural diversity, what type of art is being presented, you know, and you can see kind of in some of the images that you're showing that we tend to display a gamut. So some of them can be landscape paintings by younger artists. Some of the work is more conceptual. And, you know, like Fabiola's work outside, you know, she's young, she's a woman of color. Oftentimes in the art world, those artists have a really hard time making their voices heard and being promoted and contextualized appropriately.
So that would be one of the purposes of any permanent space, but that's long term.
I think that's one of our purposes now. I don't know that right now as a model we're in desperate need of a permanent space. I think sometimes you can ask my friend Amy that it makes it easier. You know, we walk into these spaces and every gallery has a different way of handling things, a completely different team of people that we have to work with. And I think we've barely gotten to a point where the people who are collaborating on this work really smoothly. So every time we come across a new group of people in a new space, obviously they present quite a challenge. But right now for Art&Seek, I think this is a model that's working for us. And I think that how it's forcing us to move and forcing us to embrace new ideas and new artists has really provided a huge element of growth for us.
Now, just becoming a 501c3 is a process of infrastructure building. You have to create boards. And how many people do you consider members of Art&Seek? How big of an organization is it?
So it's myself, Jay Wilkinson, Amy Cardozo, Shasta Hobrick, Brandon Peterson, and now we have 3 board members in Ariel Davis, Edward Brown,
And
Dave.
you raised $5,000 for a grant.
And we raised $5,000 for a grant.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And you know, the thing is, we are and I think I said it to Hadi, but we're a pretty bare bones organization. When we need something really desperately, we are very frugal in what we decide to spend it on. So if there's something that someone is willing to donate to us, we're always grateful for it, and we try to make the best of what we have. And to be fair, most of us that work in this organization operate on a volunteer status, all of us. So we decided to put that money into this programming, and also to create an awareness for the fact that artists really need this kind of not only moral support, but financial support.
As an advance for this evening, last Friday I interviewed Lauren Childs. State of the Arts is also as a radio component every Friday afternoon, evening, repeated on Monday. We do a segment on KERA called State of the Arts. And last Friday I interviewed Lauren Childs. And so if Jonathan can do it, I'd like to play the interview.
It's going to be a few minutes. It's not up. It didn't come back to the car.
Okay. Oh, it didn't come back? All right. Well, then I guess, Megan, we move to you.
You got it. I can take it.
There we go.
Wow, that feels very official, Jerome.
Thank you. I was telling you that was my first PowerPoint.
It's not quite in lights, but I'll take it. It's great.
Near South Side is completely different from anything we've discussed.
Yeah, I'm a
so far.
non-artist, right? So that makes me the outsider to some extent. But I think within the arts world, there is no outsider. So you want me to tell these
Try to
fine
explain
folks what I do?
if Dee had trouble, Near South Side is larger and more multi-tentacled.
Sure it is, but so I work for Near Southside Inc. We are a nonprofit community development organization. We were founded 21 years ago by a coalition of passionate, dedicated, desperate people who were business owners and institutional anchors within the Near Southside District. We're 1,400 acres large. It included, as many people still know the district as the medical district, so all of the medical institutions. But it was also a real hub for the creative class. The Fairmount neighborhood had this incredible group of artists that saw potential in the homes. They liked the character of these homes. And so in partnership, those neighbors that were using the garage apartments as artist studios and were lovingly restoring these historic bungalow homes, they founded an organization in partnership with the hospitals that had the capital and the funding to create a master plan that would revitalize this large district, and would put together through that plan a set of practices and priorities as to what needed to change the neighborhood while still keeping the cool, eclectic culture of a really diverse area. And so our organization is even leaner than yours to some extent, Dee. As far as the staff is concerned, there are 4 of us that are full-time staff members of the organization. My job as Director of Events and Communications through Near Southside Inc. is to share the message, to invite new people into that effort, to encourage them through public events and initiatives that we undertake. Could be a bus shelter design competition, it could be producing Arts Goggle, a large arts festival, to renew someone's perspective in the neighborhood and give them an opportunity to see it through a new light, to ask them to invest in unique ways. We are not just the medical district, although we're certainly proud to be the medical district. We're also home to the design district. We have more than 72 firms that work in design, in filmmaking. We've got these filmmakers are kind of flocking to the neighborhood. We've got graphic design, website development, architecture. And so for us, that unique tension between being an institutional district that also has manufacturing through Waynes and Dickey and Justin Brand boots and some of the things that you think of as being nostalgic to Fort Worth, we also have this creative class that continues to drive the conversation about the importance of a creative approach to revitalizing a neighborhood. So my job is to share that message, to invite the right parties in, to get good people doing good projects and find partnerships in that effort.
You spoke to me about the approach was totally non-traditional, no branding, nothing like that. Why? What is
our charm is really, we could maybe, we have limited funding, but there's the potential that we could take the funding we have and hire an advertising firm and create a brand and then, place that brand in a series of publications to really sell hard the neighborhood and tell you we've got the best brewer in town or we're the coolest place to have a house. But our approach intentionally is different, that instead of selling you on the South Side, we would rather create an opportunity for you to, in your own unique way, experience the South Side, and then we hope that your experience is great enough that you'll tell your friends or you'll decide to invest in the area. So we don't run any formal marketing campaign. We don't have branding standards for the district. I think in an area as diverse as ours, it would be kind of silly to have brand standards. We're trying to convey just one unique perspective in the neighborhood. So what we do is, a few years ago, we chose to intentionally reallocate that marketing budget, the traditional marketing budget that any organization has, into creative purposes that would empower people within our own district to do something great. And have a series of programs that are now related to that. We don't run any ads. You won't find an ad in town that's our organization trying to sell you on something. Instead, we have art programs that take the talent within our community, these artists that we felt like were maybe missing a rung. There was, when there's this ladder of trying to follow their career to the next obvious level, there was kind of a missing rung in the ladder, that a lot of artists were passionate about their work, they had strong studio practice, but they didn't have an opportunity to prove within the public sector the value of their work. And it was our hope that by offering programs that would then give them some public exposure and experience with small grants that would help underwrite the expenses and would pay the artist. That was a big component of what we do. We always want to create opportunities that pay artists. It teaches the artist to value their time and their talent. It teaches the public to value the time and talent of an artist. So that's a huge part of the kind of principles that guide our organization and the projects that we create.
Could you explain what this is?
I can. Yeah, this was a wild idea, and it still has hiccups because that's what any good wild idea has. So this was Art South. So when we decided we would just blow up the marketing budget and scatter the money out in other places, Art South was the very first creation of that effort. And we, I had this weird idea that I could buy a shipping, because we didn't have a gallery. At that point in time, there was no gallery in the near South Side. It's a huge district, and we've got all these unique businesses and cool little places and holes that have just great opportunity to show art, and they weren't. And there was no formal space for artists in the district. And so I thought, what if I bought a shipping container and I put a glass front to it? And then I took some of that marketing money, and on a quarterly basis, we could award artists a public art experience, not through the formal process of Fort Worth Public Art, but we could build a committee of people who had unique perspectives within the art world, some who were architects and could see this from a very architectural standpoint, some who were just adjacent property owners that cared about public art. We could give the artist some exposure and experience that they lacked. It would help them build their resume. It would add public art to our district, which there was a real hunger for public art in the near South Side. So we did. We took a shipping container, a 20-foot shipping container, put a glass front and a glass side on it, plopped it down on a very willing property owner's lot with the purchase of a very small insurance policy, and created Art South. That program has now grown. We're in our third iteration of Art South, and working towards, for the end of this year, reconfiguring the program slightly to offer more opportunities to more artists. But the way that it operates in its last version with James Talamas is that we ask for artist proposals as to what type of public art piece they would create within the confines of this box. It sits now at the Magnolia Micro Park at the corner of Henderson and Magnolia, right across from Heim Barbecue and Ket & Co. Wines. It's a prime corner in the middle of a very heavily trafficked street for people to stop and see art. And the artist is awarded $4,000. We require that at least $1,000 of that artist stipend is used as artist payment. And the other $3,000 can be dedicated to materials. And then the artist is 1 month in studio and 1 month in exhibition within the box. There's a lot of lessons to learn from something like this. The box leaked. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, now what do we do? We've got an artist working in a vulnerable material and the box leaks. But you work through those. It's still to us much more important that we would provide the opportunity and ask the artist to be our partner in working through the kinks. I feel passionate that there are great, talented artists that are continuing to hone their studio practice, and they stay dedicated to being an artist, and they are looking to provide really interesting, provocative work that has its root in a lot of social dynamic, something our own neighborhood is undergoing, this tension of gentrification, and how do we keep a diverse community in place, and what are the tools that builds that diversity. It, for us, seemed like a real obvious choice to let the artists and the talent that they have in the practice that's already a communications tool, all they needed was an opportunity. And you have to pay artists for their time. So Art South is a program that as it evolves, maybe it's no longer in the confines of this box. Although I will say, when we first launched the program, we had this 20-foot shipping container, and we said, artists, give us your proposals for what you would do inside the box. The very first artist that was selected was Jay Wilkinson, because he proposed a 30-foot sculpture outside the box. So leave it to an artist to break the mold at the very beginning. It was an incredibly rewarding experience for us.
You described Arts Goggle to me as a place where everyone needs an entry level.
Yeah.
It's non-juried. It costs $45
Yep, that's
to join.
right.
And then projects like these give, as you say, an artist now has a public art installation on their resume. What is this?
Okay, so yeah, Southside by 7 is a new program in the same vein as Arts Goggle, but it is a digital residency where we are, we have these great social media channels that Near Southside Inc. has built over the years. Instagram is one of them, Facebook and Twitter. And often we use them to share news about the neighborhood. Melt's doing a little, pop-up market. There are things happening within the development world you should know. But they could also be a very valuable tool to digital artists. A lot of times digital artists are underappreciated, in my opinion, within the confines of, gallery space. And I feel like at Arts Goggle, they struggle to show their work. I feel like at some of the art pop-up events, you don't see as many digital artists involved. Photographers are often there, but not in mass. And so we decided that we could turn the keys over to the social channels that we had to artists on a weekly basis and allow them to show 7 photos, so 1 photo a day, or 1 piece a day. It doesn't have to be a photo, it could be a video installation, it could be some type of digital artwork that would share perspective about our community through the lens of some filter. So sometimes it's about development, sometimes it's about gentrification, other times it's about housing in the South Side, or whatever experience kind of spoke to the participating artists.
So it's kind of an aesthetic community bulletin board.
Yeah, that's right. And it is a way for our organization to continue to introduce artists to the community, to give them a bit of a platform. It's only 7 days long, so it's not a very long experience, but it is a way to share the work of talented people within our own group. And our hope is that by 2018, it's a paid residency, and that each week we are offering artists. We're paying a curator now for the program to help us with some of those selections, and Olaf Growald, but we would like to, in 2018, reallocate another bucket of marketing money towards this program.
Jonathan? Good. So now we're going to back this up to Lauren. Lauren Childs, welcome.
Thank you.
You started Fort Works Art in 2014, and you were originally in a space of the South Side called the Tilt Room, most famously known now as where Leon Bridges recorded his first album.
Yes.
But in 2016, you opened a more traditional gallery space pretty much down the street from the Amon Carter, the Museum of Science and History. Why the change from this multi-use event space to a bricks and mortar gallery?
Well, when I co-founded the gallery space with J.W. Wilson in 2014, we were only producing 2 to 3 events a year on gallery night in Fort Worth. And then I really wanted to get full throttle and go month to month and have show after show. And so we needed a full-time space. And we really liked working over by the museums.
You've described Fort Works Art as, quote, existing somewhere between a gallery, a cultural center, and a museum, unquote. Why? Why did you want to create a hybrid like that?
I think I'm very ambitious, and I see that there's a lot of opportunity in the city of Fort Worth to really grow, and we can utilize all 3 of those aspects to grow our space.
Back with the Tilt Room, you were known for your gallery night shows because they were more than just paintings on a wall. You included fashion shows, live music, spoken word. Is this a continuation of that?
It's more of an evolution, I think. We're still doing the event-based things with music. However, we'd like to get into a lot more educational outreach programs and sponsorship and mentorship for artists to grow and stay here.
It's easy enough to understand the straight-up gallery aspect in terms of exhibitions. Your current exhibition, 28 grams, for example. But as a cultural center, how does that work?
How that works is really facilitating a conversation between us and the community of Fort Worth and bringing in a lot of organizations such as the Juvenile Diabetes Foundation, which we just brought in to do projects and utilize our space.
What did the Juvenile Diabetes group do?
They painted benches. They had all these kids come in and they painted these beautiful benches that they were placing in one of their facilities, and it was just it was a wonderful day.
And you started the Betsy Price competition.
Well, the Betsy Price event is kind of where everything started. It's our high school annual art competition, and it is an exhibition where local high school students get to showcase their work for 2 to 4 weeks in a gallery space.
Okay, so it's like a gallery, like a community center, but how is Fort Worth's art like a museum?
A museum in the sense that we're doing these really ambitious, large-scale exhibitions that include artists from all over the world, some of which are, take a very long time to court to get into our space.
Are you going to create a permanent collection?
We have started a little bit of one. We ended up having a residency last year with Dan Lamb. At that point, we were able to acquire some pieces of hers, and that's kind of continued. So yes, ideally, we'll build a collection slowly.
So why did you think the Fort Worth art scene needed something like this?
I've lived in Fort Worth my whole life, and it's always been a great city for culture. But when I was younger, the question was, how soon can I move out of Fort Worth to pursue my life as an artist? And now you see this influx of artists in the area who are working and living, and there's just a tremendous kind of camaraderie there. And so to foster that and allow that to continue to grow and to extend some artist residencies and more opportunities for local artists is a very exciting thing for me to think about doing.
Lauren Childs, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
With that in mind, what do Fort Worth artists need now, other than the usual time, money, that kind of thing? If you could get one thing that you wanted that you felt would actually possibly be a game changer, what would it be?
I'll answer that question. I think artists need institutional support. I think the City of Fort Worth, the Fort Worth Arts Council, the Kimbell Art Museum, the Amon Carter Museum, the Modern Art Museum, Texas Christian University are all institutions that either produce artists, benefit from artist patronage, or use artists as a way of promoting the city. And I think all of these institutions, including this one, need to be really good neighbors by having these discussions with artists and finding out how we can be better partners. And this is like a really good step by the Kimbell, so I'm gonna give you props on like having artists up here exhibiting their work and having a conversation about art and artists. But I think we can't have this separation between a city that promotes Fort Worth as a city of cowboy and culture and completely ignore any sort of dialogue, communication, support for artists. Megan, yeah, absolutely. So what Megan is doing, what Dee is doing, what Lauren is doing are all labors of love. And while these things are important to them, they're also vital to our city. And if we can't find ways of sort of emphasizing those efforts, supporting those efforts, artists don't need handouts, but at the same time, we also don't want to be in the sort of the marketing of the city without real support from the city and from the institutions. Dee talked about this a little earlier about all the grants and support that is available for artists just across 360 in Dallas. The SMU has the Moss Chumley, the Meadows Museum has the Moss Chumley Award, SMU has the Meadows Foundation grant. The National Sculpture Center has a micro grant for artists up to $2,000. The Dallas Museum has the Dozier Travel Grant up to $6,000. And it goes on and on. The only grant program I'm aware of, actually, it's maybe somebody can tell me if any of these institutions, including the Arts Council, has a grant for artists. We can't all, as artists, be or start 501c3s. That is an insurmountable requirement for an individual artist. Although we market the things that we make, we're not necessarily becoming artists to be marketers or to be businesses. We're creative people that want to exist in this space that is mutually beneficial for artists and the city that we live in. So the number one thing is like being equal stakeholders and good neighbors as cultural institutions and as educational institutions to the artists that fuel the programs that we all benefit from.
And yes. I work in the business world, and we deal with the built environment of shaping cities, and I cannot underscore more heavily that it is critical that the business community also invest within the arts. It is, if you are building a business, if you're choosing a city to locate your business in, culture and the arts shapes your decision, it shapes the employment base you have. On a daily basis, I find myself in conversations with developers who have $40, $50 million projects and encourage them to see art as an integral component of a well-built project. Art not only belongs in our public spaces, but in the private spaces, you must make an investment. There is nothing that chaps me more than to see a $50 million project go up and for all of the art to be purchased on art.com or at Bed Bath & Beyond. It's such a missed opportunity. And so, I mean, you just stand there aghast, like, what are you thinking? I mean, you're kidding? You're gonna put so much time into the architecture and the design and the materials and the space that someone will live or work in, and then you're going to put this thing on the wall that's not really art. And, you know, the charade of having projects that are well built without an investment in the arts community that makes the city they live in or they locate their business in or they are trying to attract new employment base to, great. That is a real failure within the types of practices we have now, and there are people who on a daily basis are changing that tide. They're working to integrate opportunity for artists within opportunity for a strong business model. And I think that those of us who are in a position of influence to tell a developer, to tell a new business about the vibrant art scene that exists and encourage them to look locally for those artistic components.
And I'm gonna let you finish, but there's another thing I have to say about that. This idea that huge corporations are moving to the city of Fort Worth and getting tax breaks. Part of that incentive should be for those companies to be good neighbors, and it can even be an in-kind donation. These are like practical steps, people. Let's get, for instance, the proposed hotel that's going across the street from this great institution. I don't know what's gonna happen there. I don't know what's happening there, but I think if you're gonna build something that big across from a cultural institution and be completely detached and removed from this vital art community, you're not being a good neighbor. So part of that incentive package should be an in-kind donation of space. For instance, the Fairmount Hotel in Dallas has a residency program where they provide one room in their hotel for an artist to stay for a 3-month residency, and that artist has an exhibition space in the hotel and a studio space. That is like it's probably a tax write-off for a hotel. So I think those kinds of practical steps need to happen, and not just conversations about, you know, I hope that this is the very last panel discussion we have about what we should be doing in Fort Worth, because we just need to start doing it, and we need practical steps. And I know that there are a lot of great ideas in these seats, And we all need to just sort of start saying them and like insisting that people sort of engage and listen and
Yeah.
yeah.
Buy art from local
And
artists.
then, Megan, like in terms of like financially sustainable models, the Near South Side has proven that by investing in arts, that it benefits the community financially. Like, just look at property values and like the amount of businesses that are building up there. And like Near South Side isn't necessarily a direct art institution,
No, we're
right?
not.
No, you're not. Like, they're for the benefit of the neighborhood. So if that's a model that's working for one of the fastest growing neighborhoods in Fort Worth, I don't see why that couldn't work for the city at large. It really couldn't. I think all it takes is dedication and the idea, and to acknowledge that investing in art has some legitimate currency. And then the other thing I would add is that I think as a city, we need a broader critical discourse and a critical engagement with our artists. I love the work that Art&Seek does. They've been so supportive to the arts organizations in Fort Worth. I think the Weekly has done it too, but the Star-Telegram no longer has an art critic like writing regularly. So while I think it's great that there are entry-level festivals like Arts Goggle for artists, this opportunity that the Kimbell gave to Jesse and Fabiola is really eye-opening. I would really love for people in the audience to consider what it would take for Fort Worth to put one of our own into a collection in these museums. Like, what does it take to, if we're gonna be a city of cowboys and culture, what does it really mean to champion that and to produce really, really wonderful work, and what we need to support those artists and that dialogue amongst them and with our community, because art is very personal to me. It makes me think. It has changed my mind about so many things. It makes me value my fellow human beings. And if we're not putting really the proper weight onto that kind of work, I think we all suffer.
We are running out of time, but I'd like to get some questions from the audience in the short time allotted. If anyone, yes.
My name is Alistair. The description is for me. First, I want to congratulate you for this honor. I've enjoyed participating in some of the shows you've had a hand in creating in the past. What words of wisdom for someone like me, a local community artist, do you have in helping the Fort Worth art community become even more alive? Because I am part of the younger crowd of artists, and I'm definitely committed to stepping up.
Alistair, I have to tell you that I noticed that you and Shane, who I see in this audience, put together an exhibition at the Grackle. And I think that was the first part. When we put our first show together, for instance, Amy and I, we had our experience with the museum and maybe our own school experience, but it's been a learning curve. And a lot of it is taking risks and putting yourself out there, and not being afraid to ask for help. Honestly, we had some really great mentors when we put our two together. A lot of that was born out of some really amazing discussions with Megan, with Chris, with Devin Allen from Homecoming Committee. Don't be afraid to email them. It's amazing what kind of support is out there. In terms of your own personal work, surround yourself by other artists, and surround yourself by other artists who are going to challenge you, who will tell you maybe this isn't working, or maybe you're forgetting this here. And not just the people that you're comfortable working with and the people who work like you.
Take one more question. Yes, ma'am?
In that same idea, following that same idea, I think that has been the hardest part for myself as far as pursuing art in Fort Worth. Is there a space here in Fort Worth that is dedicated to bringing artists like-minded that, you know, we can pay somebody to use their studio or anything like that? Because it feels like very lone wolf out here, you know, and there's a lot of help out there, and there's a lot of movement. But it feels like it has become really hard to penetrate those circles. There really hasn't been, you know, somebody that I recognize a brand or something that I'm like, oh, I can go to them, I'm going to do something similar. Is there a space for the artists in Fort Worth to come together that you don't know about?
I mean, I don't know how many you're familiar with, but I know that there, in addition to like the work that Art2 does, I know that there are a lot of collectives that are really starting to get things moving. I would consider maybe Art Luck, and they work primarily in the Riverside district, but they have weekly drawing sessions. A lot of it is funny. It's showing up to openings. A lot of it is building your own network of support and finding those people. And I think as more of us do that and more of us become engaged with the art that's out there, however challenging it may be for us, the faster the community grows and the more support you'll find.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think we may be putting a lot of the onus on the institutions and the arts organizations, but it's important to just be aware of your own practice, because I think something that Steve Martin said about he was doing a master class, I just saw a promo for a master class in comedy, and he was relating how he gets the question that a lot of new comedians are asking him, how do I get my act out there? How do I get in front of the public? And his response was, the most important thing is to the work that you're doing, your practice, your comedy, your studio practice as an artist, because do you want to be out in public with something that's not finished or something that's not you've not developed over time? So I think it's important for artists to recognize that we can't be boosters for the city of Fort Worth and say everybody that's making art should be in a cultural institution, but it's important that the art that we create is worthy of the conversations and discussions that we're having, because there's a distinction between someone that wants to make art because it's a natural human creative endeavor, and there are people that are willing to go through the scrutinous, peer-reviewed process of being out in public and exhibiting your work. So if you're willing to be a part of that process, then the things that you say and the things that you do have to sort of meet that peer review.
I could take one more question because it's my boss.
It wasn't easy. I mean, it wasn't easy. The restrictions or the confines that we were given were to choose an emerging Fort Worth artist, and that it could be one or many, and that we had a limited amount of space to use. And it took us a few weeks of chewing on it independently, and we were able to share some artists. I mean, each of us felt passionate about a group of artists, and there was a lot of overlap in that group. We were also told that we could not select an artist that we had a personal relationship with, or that we had a professional relationship with that we could potentially benefit from. And when you're within an art, and I'm not an artist, but so I'm maybe the most removed, but I have to say it was really difficult. And even at that, there were people worth going to bat for that we wanted to fight through. We spent hours and hours and hours really talking about these artists and looking at their work, and we could have chosen dozens of them. I mean, we were unified around the idea that Jesse and Fabiola were doing something that was meaningful. It was profound in ways that they were artists with strong studio practice, and that for their own unique reasons really spoke to us for this experience particularly.
Yeah.
I think it's remarkable that they.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's remarkable that they now have the credit of having their work shown at the Kimbell. Jesse and Fabiola, could you stand, please? Jesse? I'd like to thank our panel and judges and invite you to go upstairs to enjoy the art and conversation. Thank you very much.